How good was the New York Giants offseason? I've got that breakdown plus a lot more for you coming up next here on the Locked On Giants podcast.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily New York Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, New York Giant fans, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast family, your team every day. I'm your host, Patricia Traina, credential member of the New York Giants media for Locked On, as well as for New York Giants on SI, which is where you can find all of our written work, mine as well as that of my incredible editorial team. We're cranking out stuff for you every day. There's no off season for us as we cover the New York Giants. And as always, welcome on in to our Blue Crew community members, our everydayers, our newcomers, and everybody in between. Thank you so much for spending part of your day with us here on the Locked On Giants podcast. And on today's Locked On Giants podcast, we're going to take a look at the Giants offseason. And was it really one of the best ones Joe Schoen has put together? So I've got an opinion for you, my own opinion, of course, as well as an opinion that I want to share with you from the guys over at Locked On NFL Scouting. So we'll show you that. And then we are going to move into segment 2, the biggest improvement on the team. What is it and why is it the most improved? Well, we'll talk about that. And I've got a clip for you as well there. And then finally, we'll close things out with 2 Giant players that I don't think we're talking about enough, but who we need to talk about a little bit more in terms of the success this team potentially can have both on offense and on defense. So that's our schedule of topics for today. Again, welcome on in. Let's get into it. All right. So for this first topic, the question of did the Giants have the best offseason under the Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll era? Heck, did they have the best offseason out of any of the NFL teams? And I'm going to pop on a graphic for you here from our friends over at Locked On NFL Scouting. All right. Joe Marino, Kyle Krabs, the hosts of Locked On NFL Scouting. And you can see on the graphic, if you're watching on YouTube, that Joe Marino in his list of the best NFL off seasons chose the Giants as number 9 out of 10. Whereas Kyle Krabs didn't have the Giants on his list. But, I just want to talk about this whole idea because, I think, and with all due respect to Kyle Krabs, he's kind of selling the Giants a little short here because I think the Giants really did have a good offseason. And let's talk about why. Okay, so first, let's start off with what defines a good offseason. We can look at everything on paper and say, yeah, everything looks good. Everything is great. They should be better. I get all that. It's on paper right now, and no awards have been given out in my 30 plus years of covering the team for having a strong offseason. But that being said, look at some of what Joe Schoen has done this offseason. And these are things that he didn't necessarily do as good a job of in the first 3 off seasons of which he was general manager. All right. So the number one thing that I think he did was he went after aggressively at that, addressing every single weak area that was on the team last year. All right. He added depth on every single area. All right. So we look at offensive tackle. So when Andrew Thomas went down last year, you saw the odyssey that the Giants went on trying to find a guy that can replace him or at least finish out the string and he didn't have any success with doing that. So they added James Hudson III. They have Stone Forsythe. They drafted Marcus Bowe. So they've got depth now at the offensive tackle spot, something that they haven't had in I can't tell you how long. But we've seen it hurt the Giants when, unfortunately, Andrew Thomas has had to leave the lineup. All right, another area which he added to, which was a big, big problem, defensive line. I've said it many times on this show that Dexter Lawrence can't do it all by his lonesome. And last year, it's interesting. In training camp, the Giants had some veteran defensive linemen, and they ended up going with a youth movement. And that really didn't pan out. So Joe Schoen brought in some veterans, some experienced veterans like Roy Robertson Harris, um, Ledbetter, who I think is going to be a rotational guy. They've got Raheem Nunez Roches coming back. You're going to have DJ Davidson competing. Elijah Chapman's going to compete. Jordan Riley's going to compete. So they've got so much more talent now on the defensive line. And it's just a matter of, how they play it, how they sort it out. And let's not forget also the rookie, Darius Alexander. So they've really built up the depth on an area that just wasn't very good last year in terms of depth. Because again, take Dexter Lawrence out of the equation, and the Giants' defensive front, which in my opinion was a strength of the team when the team, the last several years, it wasn't a strength. I couldn't sit here and tell you that I would have called it a strength last year. So defensive line was addressed. Another area that was addressed, obviously, the pass rush. You've heard me say it again so many times on this show that you can't get by with just two pass rushers these days. You need to have more. And there's no such thing as too many pass rushers. We saw it in 2007. We saw it in 2011. We saw it last year in the Super Bowl from the Philadelphia Eagles. They had, a rotation of pass rushers that they could put out there and do different things with. And the Giants really haven't had that. So this year, of course, they added Abdul Carter in the draft. They added Chauncey Golston up front. Dexter Lawrence, of course, is coming back. You've got Brian Burns coming back, Kayvon Thibodeau coming back. They've got as deep of a pass rush as they've had in the Joe Schoen, Brian Daboll era. So that was a big thing for the Giants. Now, the last thing, obviously, that they went after aggressively was the defensive secondary. So they added, as you guys know, Paulson Adebo at cornerback. He's going to be the CB1, which will take some of the pressure off of Deonte Banks, who last year really proved that he couldn't handle that role just yet. They brought in Javon Holland, a safety, who I guess they're hoping is going to be able to give them the kind of production that Xavier McKinney gave the Green Bay Packers last year. The same Xavier McKinney the Giants let walk. So overall, you could say that, those are some of the areas. And then, let's talk about quarterback. Let's not forget quarterback. Now, I know some people have their doubts about the quarterback situation. Russell Wilson, is he not the same guy that he was, back in Seattle? Jameis Winston, what are you going to get from him? You've got a rookie in Jaxson Dart. Folks, the quarterback room is a lot better. I'm not saying it's going to be the top unit this year, but compared to what they had last year, this unit is going to be a lot better if guys stay healthy. They should be able to get a little bit more in terms of the deep ball and accuracy from Russell Wilson. Jameis Winston is a solid backup. Yes, he's going to frustrate you with some of the chances he takes, some of them which end up as interceptions. And then, of course, you've got the promise of Jaxson Dart, which once that is realized, hopefully that will solidify the quarterback situation for the Giants for the next decade plus. So overall, if you look at what the Giants did in the offseason, they attacked the areas that were the biggest problems the year prior, in a year where they went 3-14, a franchise worse. So do the Giants belong on the list of teams that had a top offseason? I think they do. Again, I wouldn't put them at number one, number two, but right about where they were ranked on the Locked On NFL scouting list. I think that's a fair statement. I think that's a fair placement for them. And again, we know that off seasons don't win championships. They lay the foundation for what is to come. There is still a lot of work to be done. Obviously, the coaching staff needs to pull it all together. They need to wade through the 90-man roster and decide who's going to make up the 53, who's going to make up the practice squad, who's going to be in reserve, and so on and so forth. And then, of course, we still don't know about injuries, which could pop up. But I will say this much. I think in terms of depth, I'd like to think that the Giants are a little bit better off if something were to happen at some of these key positions, if they were to have Russell Wilson get hurt, or if there was an injury on the offensive line or in the defensive secondary or in the pass rushing unit. They have depth. And this is the first time that I can honestly say that I feel good about the depth that they have brought in. at least on paper. Again, we need to see them with the pads on, which we will in another month. But I feel good about the depth and the job that Joe Schoen has done in the offseason. So we'll just see if it translates into wins. So, all right, coming up next, the unit that you can honestly say the biggest improvement was made. We'll talk about that right after this. Hey, Giant fans, ever check your bank account and wonder where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place, so you stop just managing your money and start building wealth. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track spending, and even plan long term goals. And since I've started using Monarch Money, I have a better handle on where my earnings go, and I've been better able to budget my monthly spending. So go on and take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use our promo code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. Again, that's monarchmoney.com, and that promo code is LOCKEDONNFL to get 50% off your first year. All right, Giant fans, welcome back to Locked On Giants. I'm your host, Patricia Traina. Coming up this week, OTA I think it's number 9 coming up on Thursday. I know it's Thursday. We're back in the building. The media is back in the building. So you know the routine by now. As soon as I get a chance, as soon as I get home, I get back on the studio, I'll have a show for you with takeaways, clips, interviews, all that good stuff. So I hope you will tune in. And of course, we'll keep rolling out the programs here on the Locked On Giants podcast. Hopefully you will tune in. So that's what's coming up. Now, let's get to segment 2 of our program today. The biggest improvement. Where was it made on the Giants? Folks, without question, the defense. We've got to go with the defense. And I say the defense not just because the offense, they didn't really tweak that unit as much. I mean, other than for the starting quarterback unit, the offense is the same. So I say the defense because Shane Bowen, when he came in here last year, I know one of the complaints I had about the job he did was, how could he have dropped off? When he was with Tennessee, he had some really good run defenses, and his defenses weren't bad. And then he comes to the Giants, and now all of a sudden, you sit there and you say, what are you doing, man? The defense just wasn't very good. And one of the things you have to, if you're being fair, and you have to take into consideration, Shane Bowen last year didn't have what he needed. All right. He was given Brian Burns, but basically that was it. Most of the love last year went to the offensive side of the ball. This year, however, most of the love in the offseason went to the defensive side of the ball. So Shane Bowen has a lot more with which to work, which means, hopefully, that he does not have to jam square pegs into round holes. So, for example, in the defensive secondary, Deonte Banks was asked to play the wide receiver 1 on the opposing team. Now, Banks doesn't have to do that. As Banks gets more acclimated in this system, as he builds up his confidence, they've got a guy in Paulson Adebo who can do that, take on that role. So there's more options now. All right, we mentioned the pass rush in the last segment. You've got a variety of different guys now. Burns, Thibodeau, Carter, up front, Golston, Dexter Lawrence. I can't wait to see more of what Bowen's got planned with those guys. He's having a grand old time figuring out, how to deploy all those guys at once in different formations, different wrinkles. So what I'm getting at is he now has better personnel to make this defense a lot better than it was last year. And oh, by the way, those guys who are returning this year, this is year 2 of the system. So now they have a better understanding of what is expected, the why behind what they're being asked to do. And all of that combined should make it so that the defensive players are thinking a lot less and reacting quicker. So that's one area that you could say is a reason why the Giants defense has improved. But, I want to focus on the defensive front because that was a unit that they really, really poured a lot of players into. And I think that's the key. So at the OTA last week, I asked Shane Bowen about that, about the defensive line and all this talent that he was given. And I'll play for you that clip from his presser. Shane, what do you like about your defensive line? You've got a mix of veterans. You got the young kid Darius Alexander. How does that change things for you?
Yeah, we got good depth, right? We got really good depth. Again, we'll see how these young guys go as we start going. It's still early. Like, this is practice number 5 for us, I think. So as we get through the spring and in the training camp, we'll kind of see where they're at and what we're going to be able to ask of them. But we added a couple free agents with Roy and Ledbetter as well, some veteran guys that have played. Obviously, we got Dex, we got Nacho, some of those other guys that have been here. So really encouraged about the group. I think there's a lot of versatility within the group. And you combine that with the outside linebackers as well. Between those two groups, there's a lot of versatility that we're exploring what we're going to be able to do and what we can ask of them. Like, that's a big part of it too, as it relates to all these guys. Like, the versatility is great, but let's make sure we don't overload them to the point where we take away their ability out there to go play as well. So, but really encouraged with D-line group. Dre does a really good job. Ecox does a really good job with those guys. So hopefully we can continue to improve and get rolling.
All right, everybody. That was defensive coordinator Shane Bowen responding to my question about that defensive depth that he has up front. And folks, how important is that going to be? Well, how many times did we just barely see the Giants defense just barely miss out on getting the quarterback to the ground or forcing a throw or, disrupting what's going on in the backfield? Too many. So the Giants, as I mentioned before, addressing a very, very deficient area of their team that we saw last year. We saw how deficient it was, adding veteran depth, adding some young depth. And now it's just a matter of how is Shane Bowen going to put it all together? And really, that's the key for Shane Bowen this year. How is he going to put all of this together? Now, there should be absolutely no reason why, unlike last year where you can kind of make an excuse if you want to, saying, why did he force square pegs into round holes? He shouldn't have that excuse this year. This is a make or break year for Shane Bowen. He's got more talent to work with. That defensive front, if they can't get home with a 4-man rush on a regular basis, then I don't know what to tell you. I mean, it's going to be surprising. And if they can do that, if they can get home with a 4-man rush, that's going to help the back end of the defense, a defensive secondary that is still kind of relatively young. So Shane Bowen, we talk about coaches on the hot seat. Bowen's now got a lot more ingredients in which to make a nice stew or jambalaya or whatever you want to call it. What does he do with it? Obviously, health is going to be a key factor, but he's got the talent now. There should be no reason for this Giants defense to get gashed up the gut on by the running game. There should be no reason why they can't keep up with these faster receivers that they're going to see this year. There should be no reason why quarterbacks who are mobile should be burning them. I think they've got the talent if they want to assign a spy. There's just so many more options. And, it's interesting because Bowen, in speaking to the media, he's like, look, I want to make sure I put guys in the right spot, but I also don't want to limit guys to just, where I'm pigeonholing them. So that's what the spring is for, to experiment, to look at different defensive lineups, different looks. Obviously, he doesn't have everybody on the field because some guys are injured or rehabbing from injury, but he has a good idea of who can do what. And sometimes, an assistant coach will come up with an idea and say, hey, why don't we try this? Case in point, moving Dexter Lawrence more so full-time to nose tackle. That came from defensive line coach Andre Patterson. So I'm really excited about the Giants defense. I think they're going to be that much better. And look, if they can be that much better, then that's going to also help the offense, because if the defense can make a stop, if they can keep the opposing offense in their own territory, give the Giants offense a shorter field with which to work, get turnovers, which, they couldn't seem to buy last year even if they had pulled all their money together. That's all going to benefit the team in the long run. And that's why I look at the defense as being not only the most improved unit on the team as a collective whole, but one of the most important ones, because what they do is going to help set up things for the offense and what the offense is going to be capable of doing. So defense gets my vote. Now, coming up next, we're going to close things out by taking a look at two of the most overlooked Giants, players that we're not really talking about, but we probably should be talking about a little bit more. I've got one on offense, one on defense. I'll tell you who they are right after this. All right, Giant fans, welcome back to Locked On Giants. I'm your host, Patricia Traina. In this segment, Overlooked Giants. Now, we are actually doing this mini series, if you will, over on New York Giants on SI. I'm not writing it. I have one of my writers who is doing it. He made his choices, but I'm going to give you mine. All right. So I'm going to give you mine for one on offense, one on defense. And the criteria is guys that we're really not talking about a whole lot this spring, but we probably should, because they're that important to their respective units. So on offense, the guy that I picked is wide receiver Darius Slayton. Now, Darius Slayton, he's a guy, you think of the Giants receivers, you think Malik Neighbors, you think Wan'Dale Robinson, you think Jalen Hyatt, who's having a great spring. But you know what? Darius Slayton is also having a pretty good spring, which you would expect, because look, the man's a pro. But here's the thing. Darius Slayton last year, not only was he the best blocking receiver the Giants had, right? And that wasn't even close, by the way, but he averaged 33.5 yards per reception to lead the Giants on passing attempts of 20 or more yards. So he was the true deep threat for the Giants last year, those times that they did decide to throw the ball more than 20 air yards. All right. Now, he was also the best contested catcher of the receivers last year. He had now, when it came to contested catches on those deep balls, Slayton was again the team leader. Came down with, I think, over 66% of the deep throws, 20 or more air yards. Okay, so you talk about the deep ball for the Giants, which they want to bring back, and it's not like they're going to air it out every single time, but they're going to look to air it out a little bit more often than they have in the past. And when you think of the deep ball, you want somebody who can go up and get the ball. You want somebody who, can come down with it, who can run the pattern shake free from the coverage. Darius Slayton's kind of done a good job of that under the radar. Doesn't get a lot of recognition, probably should get a little bit more. So, you throw in Darius Slayton with Malik Neighbors, who can obviously stretch the field. Jalen Hyatt, if he can keep up what he's doing and he can stretch the field. Even Wan'Dale Robinson is hoping to get some deep passes thrown his way, come out of the slot, maybe work a little bit on the outside. And you throw in the fact that you have Russell Wilson, the master of the moonball. That offense has the potential to be very explosive and very exciting. So Darius Slayton gets my vote for being the guy that we're kind of overlooking right now in the spring. All right, now what about on the defensive side? This might surprise you, but I'm going to go with slot cornerback Drew Phillips. Drew Phillips played 274 slot snaps last year as a rookie, and he finished with a 96.1 coverage rating, right? Best of the Giants slot options. All right. Now, granted, he played a lot more than I think the guy nearest to him, who had something like 50, I want to say. But here's the thing, there's two things regarding Drew Phillips. Number one, he's kind of become like an anchor in that defensive secondary. Last year, once he got his feet underneath him, I got the feeling that he was becoming more of a leader of that defensive secondary, a guy who held others accountable, a guy who was making plays and just wasn't getting a whole lot of love for it. Right. So Phillips, I look at him as a young leader of that group. And I know, they've added Adebo, they've added Holland. Those guys can be leaders. Deontay Banks can certainly turn into a leader. So can Tyler Nubin. But Phillips, to me, just I think was more out front and center in terms of leading that defensive secondary and holding his teammates accountable, holding himself accountable. So that was something that really stuck out at me with him. And then the other thing regarding Drew Phillips is how nice was it to finally have a guy who anchored that slot position. Now, I go back a couple years ago, the Giants had a rotation. They had a committee, and it didn't really work that well. Now, it's interesting because Cordell Flott was initially drafted, and he was a slot guy when he was at LSU. And they moved away from that. They moved him to the outside, and that really didn't work out. But by that time, they had brought Phillips in via the draft. And it's just, they have options. So if Phillips is not in there, you figure Flott will be the backup. But to me, Phillips is just an under the radar type of guy on the defense that we're not talking about enough. A key guy that we need to talk about more, a guy who can help with that defense, calm things down, the leadership, and just I have big expectations for him. I think he's going to be even better than he was last year. As a rookie, again, he started off kind of on the slow side while he was getting his feet underneath him. He's going to get better. Got to clean up some of the missed tackles that plagued his game. But Drew Phillips, in my opinion, one of the most underrated guys on the Giants defense. Now, I've given you my choices for underrated on the offense and on the defense. I'd like to hear what you think. So if you're watching this video on YouTube, drop a comment. Do you agree, disagree? And if you disagree, who do you think is underrated on offense and defense? And then for those of you who are listening on the audio platforms, my contact information is in the show notes. If you want to send a thought over, and we can, I can work some of that into a future show coming up if I get any kind of response or enough of a response. So that being said, Giant fans, that's going to do it for this edition of Locked On Giants. Again, thank you for spending part of your day with us here on the Locked On Giants podcast. It is appreciated. Now, before we say goodbye, for your second listen today, check out the Locked On NFL Scouting podcast. As training camps get closer and moves are being made, your hosts, Kyle Krabs and Joe Marino, will make you the most informed NFL fan this offseason. Find Locked On NFL Scouting on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcasts. All right, Giant fans, I'll be back later this week with another episode of Locked On Giants. Until then, have a good one. See you soon.